This podcast is sponsored by FortuneFavours.ie. FortuneFavours.ie is a home workout equipment store and your one-stop shop for all home gym equipment. They are well known for their adjustable dumbbells, which combine 15 different weights in one dumbbell. They have both 24 kg and 40 kg adjustable dumbbells. Check the link in the bio of this episode for more information. So, welcome back to the podcast. For the preview this week, I'm joined by Davy Rispin from the We Are Meath Podcast to discuss this weekend's Allianz Football League games, including between our two sides, Cork and Meath, battle in Pairc Tailteann, a relegation battle it seems to be though in Division 2. It's a crucial game. I suppose, first of all, Davy, how are you at the moment? Like, I heard you got injured last weekend.
Thankfully on the mend and all good, but I'll probably be sidelined for a few weeks. So not ideal early in the season, Matt, but I suppose it's better to get it now than before club championship kicks in.
Definitely. And I suppose Meath Cork this weekend, big game for both our counties. Like, what have you thought of Meath so far? Like, they've drawn to Down and Offaly, they've lost to Roscommon and Galway. Galway, you didn't score in the first half at all, but do you think gradually you've improved as the league went on, or are you disappointed about the last two games?
Oh, it's a tough one. I suppose on reflection, you'd have said that the draw against Offaly the last day is a point gained based on the way the game went. And I suppose we nicked a last gasp equalising goal right at the death, 75th minute through Joey Wallace. So from that perspective, that draw almost, for Meath fans walking away from that game, felt better than the draw the week before against Down. Because I suppose against Down, we were 3 points down at halftime. Gale Force breeze behind us in the second half. We came out, we scored 3 points. Down didn't even score in the second half, but we didn't even manage to score from play. And that's been the problem, to be honest with you, Matt, for me throughout the course of the league, is actually getting scores from play. We went 90 minutes between the Down game and the Offaly game without scoring from play, which is a massive concern. And I suppose it shows the lack of confidence in our forward line at the moment as well. So that's a big concern. The plus side of it is you've got 2 points from your last two games, and obviously, as you know, Cork only on a point going into this weekend, so it all really hinges on Sunday's game. It's a massive game for both, and hard to believe, I suppose, before a ball was kicked, Meath definitely would have had aspirations of challenging for promotion. As you mentioned, after the first two games against Galway and Roscommon, those were questioned, straight away off the bat, and we just need a win, and I think a win for Meath would lift the spirits. It would get the morale going again, but a defeat obviously plunges us really in deep bother.
You actually mentioned that the forwards aren't scoring that much. Their scores here, like Jordan Morris is the only one that really jumps off the page, scoring 13 points, 5 from play. Your second top scorer actually is your goalkeeper, Harry Hogan. So, that's been a massive problem. Even against Dublin, you scored, I think, 4 points in the Leinster final in 2019. You scored a low tally as well in 2020. Has this been a constant problem for years for Meath, or is there any sign that you're going to solve it?
I suppose the gradual departure of Mickey Newman, who would have been our talismanic forward for most of the last 10 years, has left a big void in that full forward line. And to be fair to Jordy Morris, he's a very young player. He's stepped in and he's done brilliantly, I have to say. Last year, he was exceptional in most of the games in which he played. He only made his debut, the year before. So he's carried the can largely. And thereafter, when we were going well, probably back to 2018 with the promotion to Division 1 and the run to the Super 8s, you were getting scores from across the board. The likes of Brian Menton, who isn't currently available for us in midfield, would always kind of weigh in with a point or two a game. Donald Keoghan from that half-back line made those raiding runs and created space and opportunities up front. And yes, to answer your question, it probably has been a problem over the last 18 months, I would say. We have hit purple patches in games, and this is the frustrating thing. Even if you look back to last year's Leinster semi-final against Dublin, a really sort of poor and lackluster first half, but we come out second half and then shoot the lights out. similar in games gone by there as well, against even Roscommon, second round of the league, Ferry Poultry returning in the first half, but hit a purple patch second half. But you're giving yourself too much to do. It's almost as if Meath kind of need to go 7 or 8 points down in the game before they start playing and releasing the shackles and that kind of thing. But there's undoubtedly quality in the squad. It's not as if, the forwards aren't capable of scoring, or they don't have that in their locker. I mean, I see them week to week when they go out and play for their clubs, and they're really sort of talismanic players. I just think it's a serious lack of confidence at the minute, which is stemmed from probably that Galway game first day out.
And even during the winter, the Andy McAtee debacle, he could have left and he stayed on in the end. There was a huge amount of pressure on him going into the year. Has that translated onto the pitch, do you think?
Do you know what? The more I think about it now, it may well have done, and possibly not even intentionally. I know the players sometimes can kind of feel the anxiety coming from the crowd, and Andy's obviously under such pressure after what happened during the winter months that really a manager at this stage of the year, I look at Keith Ricken, for example, with Cork, and he's only there in the job, and I don't feel the same pressure with him because he's relatively new. And he kind of has the support in what he's trying to do and overhaul the squad. With Andy, this is his 6th year, and it's probably thought that this may well be his last year. And sometimes subconsciously, the players, almost like they do in soccer, when they feel that a manager might be coming to the end of his tenure, not that they stop playing, but the performance levels dip. And possibly that's what's happening at the minute. But Andy and Colm Nally, who we've spoken to in recent weeks, have insisted that the training is going well. The players are all, in unity and harmony together. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's just not manifesting out onto the pitch on a Saturday or Sunday.
And I suppose just looking at the last 3 meetings between the sides, Meath and Cork, they haven't met regularly like they did in the 90s, for example, or even up to 2007 when there was savage battles. But the last 3 meetings actually was a win for Meath, a win for Cork, and a draw. So that shows you, in a way, how close these sides have been over the last few years.
Absolutely. I think back to Navan, I think was it possibly 2018, 2019, Cork came to Navan and beat us. And even the meetings in Pairc Tailteann, I've been down at, they've been ferocious battles. And I suppose the one common thread between them all is that they're tight games. There's not, regardless of who wins, there's only a couple of points in it either way. And I think looking ahead to Sunday, you'd have to say that based on the low ebb that both sides are at, it could well be a kind of tense and tight affair from start to finish. Meath haven't blown anyone away, and I suppose the scoreline that Cork put up the last day against Galway, 217, would be a cause for concern. The polar opposite to that is that obviously they conceded 322, so there may well be opportunities for Meath to get through Cork. But Meath will certainly have to show more than they've showed in any of the 4 games to press.
And you mentioned Cork scoring prowess. It really was shown against Galway the last day. I made a list of players in Division 2 that are top scorers in both from play and overall. And Cork actually have 3 players across both lists, and Meath obviously have only Jordan Morris. That has to be a concern for Meath as well, that they're not scoring enough. And Cork seem to be scoring well with Sherlock, Brian Hurley, and Blake Murphy coming into it as well.
Absolutely, and Meath have defensive problems as well. Obviously, Conor McGill, who'd be the resident fullback, has missed all of the league to date. We lost Cathal Hickey and Robin Clark in the first half of the Offaly game, so they're big injury doubts going into this weekend. And that's 3 your starting 6 defenders, and that's not to mention Shane McEntee, the Meath captain, who's actually going abroad to Mali with the army. So that's another one gone. And the one thing that Cork do have, as you said, is they have scoring forwards. Sherlock the last day, Brian Hurley if he returns, Blake Murphy. They're players that Meath will need to watch. And in saying that, defensively, in a funny way, Meath have been okay, particularly in recent games. They haven't been too bad. They've improved significantly. But one of the key aspects of the Meath game is actually getting runners from deep, and that stems from the half back line, the likes of Keoghan, Hickey, etc. And if they're to be focused on defensively carrying out their job, then I suppose it's a hard balancing act to get them to give you something offensively as well. But that's the type of game plan that Andy has installed over the last number of years, and that's something that Meath are going to need a big sort of performance from this weekend, is that half back line.
You actually mentioned that Meath are missing so many players as well, but Cork, on the other hand, are missing so many players. Like I've heard someone DM me on Instagram the other day saying Billy Hennessy might be out for this game. He's quit the Cork panel already.
Wow.
So, like some Cork players are actually quitting. Mark Collins, Rory Dean, Sean White, Mark White. So there's a lot of players in the Cork team as well. Does that kind of show how far back the two counties have gone since the glory days?
I think it does. I think realistically, when you pull yourself away from it and you kind of look at it, you try and look at it from a neutral's perspective. The sides have got to Leinster and Munster finals in recent years, but realistically, neither have got anywhere close to challenging Kerry or Dublin for major honours. And that's a massive sort of concern. Obviously, a lot of work has been done in the respective underages, Cork being at under 20s in the Meath minors from last year as well. So I suppose the future is bright. And again, not to reference it, but like when you look at what Keith Ricken is trying to do, I understand why he's had a major overhaul in the squad and he's trying to focus on youth. But as you say, with the injuries, he's probably left himself a little bit short now, and there's a lack of experience in the squad. Andy is kind of stuck by and large to what he's had. There's been a few additions to the panel, but not a major overhaul in the last couple of years. So it's quite a consistent sort of panel for Meath. But there is most definitely still a massive gulp in class. And I mean, just looking at Leinster, you see what Kildare are doing at the minute. They're most definitely the team sort of second in command in Leinster. And then even in Munster, if you look at, like, I suppose what Clare are doing, Limerick are making strides as well further down. And it's probably not looking great for Cork or Meath, but I suppose that's the importance of them preserving their status in Division 2 and not going down to Division 3 and who knows what, Tailteann Cup or Tier 2 maybe next year.
And you mentioned Tier 2, like this is the big thing in this game, like even for Meath, like because Offaly and Down, you played them already and drew. Does this put more pressure on the Cork game to win a game? Because your next two games after this, I'm not sure what order, but it's Derry and Clare in the last two games. So, like, if you lose this game, it could be trouble for Meath.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we do, we have to go down to Clare in Ennis the following week, and then Derry at home last day, and that there's every chance that Derry are probably going to be going for promotion that day as well. So absolutely, it's a huge game for me. I would say it's one of the biggest games in Andy McEntee's tenure. I really would. In the grand scheme of things, the importance and significance of preserving your status this year above all else. Like if it was last year, the year before, okay, you don't want to go down to Division 3, but there was no danger of obviously missing out on playing All-Ireland Championship football, whereas this year it's a distinct possibility if you don't make your provincial decider. And I know in Leinster there's no open draw, so there's every chance that Meath, if the dude did negotiate whoever it is, I think it's Laois in the quarterfinal, you could end up meeting Dublin or Kildare in the semi-final and find yourself in the Tailteann Cup then for this year. So that's a huge issue. I think for Cork it could be the same possibly with Kerry as well in the semi-final. So it's definitely a bigger game for me, I think, because it's on their own patch and they've played down or Offaly, as you said. Cork still have the comfort blanket, if you will, of falling back on those games if they need it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, look at Cork's last two fixtures, they've Down at home and Offaly away. But even then, look at Offaly's performances against Meath, as you say. I didn't watch the game particularly, but look at the Galway game as it developed in Scorpio. Like, it looked like Offaly put Galway under pressure as well. So going to O'Connor Park, that won't be easy at all either. Like this should be a massive relegation battle. Like I think Pat Spillane actually mentioned on League Sunday, when you look at Down, Cork, Meath, the recent All-Ireland champions. Cork won in 2010, Meath in 99, and we're in the All-Ireland semi-finals, of course, in like 09 and 07 as well. Yeah. So if them counties go down, if two of them counties go down to the Tailteann Cup, that'll be some fall from grace.
Oh yeah, very much so. And again, it is a sign of the times. I haven't been overly impressed with Down. We've played them, each of the last 2 years, and they're on a downward spiral, no pun intended. And the likes of Cork and Meath we've already spoken about, and unfortunately, I suppose when you take 2007 and 2009 aside, and 2010 obviously for Cork and Down, like they are two completely different panels now, and you have to be realistic about it too. And things have moved on, players have departed, managers have come and gone, and it has been just a struggle. Like Meath, for each of the last 15 years, barring 1 year in Division 1 and 1 year in Division 3, they've been stuck in the Division 2, not quite good enough to make it out and consolidate in Division 1, and not quite poor enough to drop down. And I think even Cork, if you look at the recent struggles, each of the last 3 or 4 years, you know, yourselves, you've been kind of fighting relegation year in, year out in Division 2. So it still would send shockwaves through the country, I think, if one of Meath or Cork were to go down, or even down at that point. But it's a massive concern, yeah.
I suppose going back to Cork, like the last 4 games have been so inconsistent. Look at the performances. Like the Roscommon game, I actually wasn't at that game, but the next 3 games, Clare was an okay performance. Derry, we got hammered. And then against Galway was a brilliant performance despite the 8-point loss. Like, you know, like consistency is a main thing with Cork at the same time. Even looking at the last few years, like we challenged Dublin and Tyrone in the Super 8s. We beat Kerry. Then we lose to teams like Tipperary and Kildare. So, like, consistency is a main thing really for Cork, looking down through the years.
Yeah, again, I understand what Keith Ricken is doing, but possibly the overhaul was a little bit too drastic. And I've seen it happen in Meath in years gone by as well, where a manager comes in and he completely sort of changes the panel and gets rid of maybe too many too soon. Because I would be a big advocate for keeping a number of experienced campaigners, for young players to come in and learn from them. And you know, I think that's really important. Unfortunately, in Meath in the last couple of years, we've had that. And I do hope that in the next couple of years, with the under-20s coming through in the next year or two, we will still have experienced campaigners to sort of bed themselves in, because it won't happen overnight. We've seen it happen on countless different occasions in other counties that, you know, they bring in mass amounts of young players, but without sort of the core of experienced troops there, it won't work. So possibly that's the concern maybe for Cork at the minute. If the likes of, we'll say, Brian Hurley isn't to play this weekend, you look down through it, you know, Powter's not probably going to be playing as well. Ian Maguire and a couple of other players, that's the only bit of experience you might have.
And even Sean Meehan went off injured against Galway. Like once he went off, Damien Comer and Shane Walsh started causing wreck inside there. So he's crucial to that Cork team in there as well. And Brian Hurley, maybe more crucial than Brian Hurley in my opinion, because he's the glue that's, you know, ties it together at the same time. But would you be backing your own county Meath to get a win here in Pairc Tailteann, or do you think Cork is go up and cause a shockwaves in Division 2?
It's a funny one. So we've played against the Breeze in each of the last 4 games, and the last 2 games at half time I was mightily confident that we'd go on and win them. We were a point down against Offaly with a big Breeze behind the second half. We were 3 down against Down with a Gale behind us as well. This weekend, I mean, yes, it's must win essentially. I don't think a draw is much good for me. I think Cork, possibly a draw wouldn't be the worst results, but for me, it's must win. Do I think they have enough? If they defend like they have in recent weeks and they can put that clinical edge on some of the moves, they did carve out 4 or 5 genuinely really good goal chances against Offaly. Obviously, just converted 1 at the death. But if they can touch up on those and apply the finishing touches, I do think Meath have a little bit more in it. And just with the injuries and the lack of experience in the Cork ranks coming to Navan, I'll just side with Meath, but it would be a very reluctant nod, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know what to say for this game. All right, so I think a draw is probably the safest option for prediction here. Like, there's really
the draw specialists, yeah, both.
Definitely. And it's shown the sign of the times, as you said, throughout this chat. And that game is live on the TG4 app at 2:00 on Sunday as well. The next game we're going to talk about is another relegation dogfight game in Division 2. Down against Offaly. It's on Saturday night at 5. Like, Down have home advantage in this game. But Offaly, you've seen them yourself against Meath, and by the looks of it against Galway, they performed pretty well as well. Could they survive against all the odds, do you think?
If you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I'd have said no chance. But based on what I seen from them that day against Meath, where they should have won, they impressed me. First half was not a good watch, but second half against the Breeze, I thought they applied themselves brilliantly. They still have the the veteran Niall McNamee going strong. He was absolutely brilliant against Meath in that game. I think he accounted for 1-3. Rory in there as well. He's the captain now this year. Do you know what? They'll relish it, because I think the difference between Offaly and the likes of Down, Meath and Cork is there's no pressure on Offaly. Everybody expects Offaly to go down and be relegated. They're in sort of bonus territory, and every game they play is essentially a free hit. The pressure is going to be on Down, like as you said, home game, massive weight of expectancy on them. James McCartan in there as well, back again. Like, for them, it will be a hammer blow to go down. But to me, Down haven't improved. If anything, they've regressed throughout the course of the league. Whereas Offaly, there's definitely signs of improvement week on week there. And if they could continue that trend, that's another game that's, I won't say it's a 50-50, but it could easily go either way.
You mentioned Down have regressed throughout the league, but if the Kilcoo lads come back, I'm not entirely sure about this, but if they do come back, even some of them into the Down team, do you think that'll improve them some way, or do you think it'll probably be the same level of performance?
It should improve them. But again, the thing is, like, they've had a little bit of a break, obviously, since the club win. Okay, they might have played a challenge match maybe last weekend in the gap week and stuff like that. But it is hard to get yourself back up to the pitch of it, particularly at inter-county level. And they have some nice players, absolutely. I was impressed with them in the first half at times against Meath, but I didn't see enough to tell me that they're absolute nailed on to survive this division. If anything, the way the Division 2 is shaping up is like you have probably 3 teams vying for promotion. You have Clare, who are just the common ground, and then you have the four teams at the bottom who are, I won't say as good as each other, but maybe as bad as each other as well. And Down will most definitely fit into that category. The last day, I think against Roscommon on home soil, I just caught the highlights of it, completely wide open. Roscommon ran through them at ease, could have had a lot more as well on the afternoon. So that's a big concern for them, the fact that they're not kicking on as the league goes on. At least with the likes of Offaly, Meath, and indeed Cork, there's been signs of life in the last number of weeks. With Down, I don't think I could really say that, to be honest.
So looking at the last few fixtures, would you tip Down to be odds on to go down at the same time? Do you think Offaly, Meath and Cork will fight it out to avoid the second spot?
I would still say Offaly and Down will be the two to go down. Yeah, I do think Cork can and will pick up results against Offaly and Down if needs most. And that's me banking on Meath getting a win against Cork this weekend, and possibly something against Clare or Derry thereafter. That'd be my take on it from this point on. But as you said, if Offaly can go to Down, get a win, suddenly they have a brilliant chance of preserving their status against Cork then, so it's I think this weekend's going to tell an awful lot. I think the picture will become an awful lot clearer come Sunday evening as to who is likely to make the drop. If Meath don't win on Sunday, they're odds on, I won't say certainties, but odds on favourites to probably drop down to Division 3.
And in regards lastly to that Down and Offaly game, like I even looked at their scores, both sides. They have like around 10 scores each. Like, this game should be really low scoring, but would you expect Offaly to go up and cause a shock against Down, or think Down can possibly improve and win the game?
I think Down can improve and win the game, and they have to be brutally honest. But that's with the caveat that if they don't, I fancy Offaly to go up and do a job. But the home advantage, the fact that they know it's a must-win game, it's a game that James McCartan would have targeted at the start of winning. The Roscommon game 2 weeks ago would have been a sort of bonus game at the start, I would say. So for them, they'll understand the importance of this. And this is essentially probably the biggest game they'll play all year as well, including whatever happens in Ulster. So I think Down might just edge it, but as you say, I think it'll be a close, tense, pretty low-scoring affair.
Should be very low scoring indeed. Not a pretty watch indeed. But I'm going to go for shock. I think Offaly could win this game. I don't know. They're improving week on week, as you said. Down have to win. There's a huge pressure on them, and maybe that pressure could be a bad thing for Down at the same time. So we'll have to wait and see on Saturday, I suppose. We're moving up the table in Division 2 now, a place where we both want to be, but honestly, we're not at the moment. It's Roscommon against Derry, 2:00 on Sunday in Dr. Hyde Park. Crucial game for Roscommon this. They're on 7 points behind the big two, Derry and Galway, at the moment. So Roscommon really have to win this game to have any chance of getting promoted again.
Yeah, absolutely. At home at the Hyde, I think it's a big one for them. It's also a big one for Derry. It's on paper, it's both of their toughest assignments to date. Obviously Galway waiting in the wings as well. For Roscommon, I was impressed with them the last day against Down. Against Meath, I think at times they look good, but they struggled to kind of find their feet in large parts of that game, and Meath almost caught them at the death in that game. But for me, this is a huge game because whoever wins has one foot in Division 1. It's as simple as that, really, because I think you can sort of afford to lose one game, but you can't afford to lose against your promotional rivals. For Derry, they've been just on that crest of a wave. They've really just carried on, haven't they? You know, in the last couple of years' progression, they've gone from 4 to 3 and now to 2, and they're looking to make the jump back up to Division 1, and it would be a brilliant success story if they did that. But Roscommon with the likes of the Shines, or not the Shines, the Smiths rather, Carl Hennigan playing ever so well as well. He's got great confidence after the Sigerson Cup run he had as well. He was mightily impressive against Meath. So I think Roscommon are in a good place. I think they're improving throughout the course of the league. Undoubtedly, Derry are going well, but to me, Derry haven't had probably any way of a test going into this game, and I just fear for them that they might be a little bit undercooked in this one, and I just have to probably side with Roscommon to get the better of them.
It's an interesting one with Roscommon, actually, because the last few years you would have just picked maybe one player, like in the early 2010s, Donny Shine, throughout the years, in the Smith in some years, Conor Cox. But when I look at their team now, they actually have scores all over the pitch. You look at Cox, of course, in the Smith, Donny Smith. You also have Carl Heenan, who, as you said correctly, just had a superb Sigerson Cup. That game against UL, he was absolutely outstanding. And Keane McKeown there as well, another good young player. So that has to be a positive for Roscommon moving forward as well.
Absolutely. I think the wide array of scores, and to mention, like even back 5-6 years ago, it was the likes of Donny Shine who carried them for large parts. Conor Cox has just been a breath of fresh air since he's come into the Roscommon ranks. The Smiths have gone from strength to strength. Heenan's been brilliant. McKeown too. Like, what you're getting at is you're getting scoring forwards. When you look at the likes of, let's just take our own two counties. When you look at Meath and Cork, we don't have 5 scoring forwards between us. And the beauty about that is that if one player has an off day or gets double marked or whatever, it's very hard to mark 5 scoring forwards across the board. And that's not to say that they're going to get scores from their half back line in midfield as well. They're a really well-oiled machine. I think they're well set for another tilt to Division 1, even though they've been the yo-yo club year in, year out. To me, they're probably one of the most consistent teams in the country in terms of what you get from Roscommon kind of year to year in Division 2. They're a perfect blueprint for how I'd like me to be operating. But I expect them to embrace this game, and this is a massive test for them. Derry ultimately will learn a lot more about them as well after this weekend. They've been superb, and at the end of the day, they're probably still going to have another shot at it if they do get beaten this Sunday. But I fancy Roscommon, I think, to just about do enough.
And even you look at Derry's team, they have some brilliant scoring forwards throughout the team. And unthinking as well, they bring in these minor players as well, the likes of Matthew Downey, the likes of Lachlan Murray, who were outstanding against Cork, for example. And you look at Meath's minors last year, going back to Meath. Do you think it's a wise idea to maybe bring in the minors similar to what Derry have done so far? Because Murray and Downey have done brilliant in the league when they played.
Yeah, it's a catch-22. I suppose for Meath, we've had little or no success at under 20 level. So I know that there's been massive sort of emphasis placed on that grade this year. And John McCarthy, who's over that team, he's basically put last year's minors and the year before's minors together. And that forms the nucleus of the squad. And the view would be that possibly until such a time that the under 20 competition is over, then maybe the players could come in and join the senior panel for the start of the championship, if that's to be a runner. But it's been a brilliant exercise, I suppose, for Derry. They've got great joy from it. I suppose the rationale behind it is because they're progressing year on year, and in order for them to join, I suppose, what's been a winning team over the last number of years and clearly improving from year to year, I think it's a wise move. Meath probably just haven't had that success at senior level, or they haven't had that progression, which is maybe why they've taken the stance to not throw young fellas in at that stage. But it's an excellent blueprint, for counties looking to maybe do similar if they're on that sort of winning momentum, because it's great. I think for a young player to come into a winning environment is huge. If you come into a team that's maybe struggling, you can find yourself getting involved in that rush. Whereas when a player comes in after having success at underage ranks, it's just a continuation and you just carry on. And for Derry, that's been perfectly, exhibited from them.
Yeah, definitely. And Roscommon, Derry should be a very interesting game. You'd be going for a Roscommon win again.
Yeah, what about yourself?
It's a tough one.
Another draw.
That's the safe bet at the moment. That's it.
Yeah.
I'd probably go Roscommon as well. Just home advantage will get them over the line. And as we've listed the forwards there, and it'll be a big test for Derry. If Derry get within 1 or 2 points, I don't think it'll be the end of the world for them. They can recover from this, but should be a very interesting game. And the last game is between Galway and Clare, both sides in the top half, but it looks like Galway are going to win this game. Like, I've looked at their score. They have 17 different scores in Division 2, which kind of begs the question, are they too good for this division?
They probably are, Matt. Let's be honest about it. And I think the scary thing is, by and large, they haven't got out of second or third gear yet. I particularly the games I've seen them in, the Meath game, for argument's sake, the last day against Offaly, they probably just cruised through, did enough. They were never going to lose the game, but they just didn't really blow Offaly away. And even against Cork, credit to Cork first and foremost, but when they needed to press the turbo in that second half, they just kicked on. And you mentioned it, they have gears, and with the likes of Comer back in now, Shane Walsh has just gone from strength to strength. To me, he's in, I would say, the top 2 or 3 in the country right now. I really do think that. He's an incredibly talented footballer, brilliant off left and right foot, and they're a side that I think are a Division 1 team, and they're certainly in the top 8 of the country. I don't think anyone could really argue the point at this point in time. And I fully expect them to just carry on and to solidify their place at the top of the table.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with you, Shane Walsh there. I think I mentioned the J Fan TV as well. The guy is one of the best players in the country, in my opinion. I think he's up there with Rian O'Neill or David Clifford. I think he's that good. He's a superb talented player. He actually, strangely enough, I don't think he actually scored against Offaly the last day, but still, he's just an unbelievable player at the same time. And about Galway, I know they're Division 2, but would you see Galway as all-Ireland contenders? I know there's Mayo, there's Kerry, but at the same time, Tyrone have a few players safe in the panel. Dublin, we all know, are disarray at the moment. But do you think Galway could join the Elise counties and become all-Ireland contenders for 2022?
I don't, to be brutally honest, and the reason being is because I still feel that Mayo are a good bit ahead of them. So straight away you put them at best second fiddle in Connacht, probably Roscommon being a close third to them. And then from that, I would say they're probably best of the rest, if that makes sense. So they're certainly better than anything after Dublin and Leinster, and probably better than anything after Kerry and Munster. And in Ulster, you could argue the point as well. The thing I felt with Galway for a number of years now is that they set the world alight early in the season, but when it comes to championship, it almost feels as if they've peaked already and they're regressing. Now, this year, there could be a conscious sort of decision to maybe, because of the fact they're in Division 2, they can kind of get away with not being at full tilt. And that might be something that Pairc Joyce is looking at doing, that to just cruise through, but aiming to kind of hit the ground running come May time and really attack the Connacht Championship. For them, that's massive. If they could topple Mayo in Connacht, I think that would be a massive sort of coup for them, and they would definitely then go on and be genuine All-Ireland contenders. But until such a time that they do that, I do feel they're still missing something. I'm not quite sure what it is. They have the class, they have the youth, they have the strength and depth. But for me, there's just some little missing part. But I do think a provincial title could well eradicate that, and that could turn them instantly into All-Ireland contenders.
And even before COVID, I remember one of their performances against Tyrone. Like, I think they scored 425 or something crazy like that. That was a superb performance. And if they could go back to that form even, they could be up there. But maybe it's kind of premature considering they're Division 2. But just before we leave this game, a word on Clare as well. Like, they're middle of the road, really. They're not going to go down. They're not going to go up. They have one score across the board list I've mentioned. That's Keelan Sexton. Like, where are Clare at the moment? Like, they have some good players coming through. Daniel Walsh, Emmett McMahon from the Sigerson Cup, Owen Clear, David Tuberty still doing the business there. Like, Where do you think they are? Could they potentially reach a Munster final this year?
They could. They really could. And do you know what? I like Clare. I think they're consistently punching above their weight. As you said, okay, they're rarely challenging for promotion, but the biggest compliment I could pay Colin Collins is that they're rarely, if ever, down in the depths of a relegation scrap. And for that, they deserve incredible plaudits. I think down there in Ennis, it's one of the toughest places to go. I know Kerry have struggled down there in recent years, in championship football as well. I just think for the size of the county in terms of what they produce football and wise, they consistently manage to punch above their weight. As you said, some of the forwards there, I mean, Tubridy, he's probably one of the oldest, inter-county footballers or forwards out there, but he still manages to come back year after year. And there's definitely a bit of a clannish sort of nature about Clare. And I think it's no coincidence that Colin Collins is there. I think he's probably one of the most longest serving managers in the country now. He's done a magnificent job, and I just think they're middle of the road, as you said. But for them, that's an extraordinary achievement, and it's probably their success in doing that consistently has maybe made us look at them and kind of say, well, you'd expect them to go on and challenge again. But for me, what they're doing is just amazing, and how they sustain it year after year is great credit to them.
I actually think they deserve more credit from pundits at the same time, because they're an absolutely brilliant team, brilliant manager, Colin Collins. He's actually the longest serving manager now after Jim Gavin left Dublin, Mickey Hart left Tyrone. So, yeah, that's some achievement from him, and best of luck to Clare for the next few years. And strangely enough, we'll go second from Division 2. We're on to Division 1. We usually start with Division 1, but because Division 2 is so important to both of us, we'd start with Division 2 in this episode. But Armagh against Kildare, it's on at 6 o'clock on Saturday. The BBC iPlayer or GA Go, depending on your location. Like, Kildare, brilliant win over Dublin last weekend. I'm sure you don't want me talking about Kildare doing so well at the moment, but they seem to be doing very well in Division 1, beating Dublin, obviously, and Armagh going well as well.
Yeah, Armagh have been brilliant, and they've kind of carried on. If you're looking for sort of outsiders to maybe challenge in Ulster, you'd have to say that Armagh and Derry as well are probably to the forefront of that. The forward line that Armagh have, you've mentioned Rian O'Neill already. Krug and Stephen Campbell, who doesn't even start kind of week in, week out. I think it's an embarrassment of riches that they have there. But again, Kieran McGeeney's been there years. They've stuck with him. They've given him probably the benefit of the doubt in a couple of years. And had he not had this sort of legendary status in Armagh, maybe they would have changed the manager sooner. But it just shows the benefit of sticking with the man, and he had a long-term vision for them, and look at what they're doing now. With Kildare, do you know what? I have to take my Meath sort of tinted glasses off and give them credit, because I think they've been brilliant. I really do. I thought last year under Jack O'Connor, we played them in a relegation in a promotion playoff up in Newbridge, and they only beat me by 3 or 4 points, but they were soundly 10 or 12 points better than Meath on the day. I was mightily impressed with them. There is that Newbridge element to them as well, though. They're so good on their home patch, and possibly when you take them out of Newbridge and put them on a bigger pitch, they maybe do struggle against better quality teams, i.e. Armagh this weekend. So that'll be a big test for them. But I have to say, Glenn Ryan's gone in there. He's obviously, a very decorated backroom team behind him as well, who have the respect of not just the supporters, but also the players. And that's worked brilliantly. They've given themselves a mighty good chance of staying up in Division 1 now. And I think if they win this weekend, pitted with a Dublin loss, that relegates Dublin, which is astonishing. And based off their win last week, which was no fluke, they thoroughly deserved it. If anything, they could have won by a couple of points more. And they've been brilliant. Great forwards again. Daniel Flynn, he has that bit of X factor. But I think if you look at the likes of Jimmy Hyland, if you're talking about forwards who are in the top X amount, for me, he's in the top 5 or 6 in the country right this minute. He's playing at the top of his game. He's a brilliant talent. And I expect them to go to Armagh and cause Armagh trouble. But I do feel that, on the bigger pitch in the athletic grounds, with Armagh buoyed on by what will be a big sort of partisan crowd, they should look to kick on, and they're in the mix for a place in the knockout stages, and this is a great opportunity for them to go and seize that.
Definitely is, yeah. And even going back to Kildare, like, they have another game in Newbridge, I think, against Monaghan. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, I think it is against Monaghan. I think so, yeah. But if they beat Monaghan then in Newbridge, you'd have to fancy them to stay up. Like, 5 points really should be enough in most years to stay up. So to stay up in Division 1 against all the odds, that'd be some achievement for Kildare, and the incentive really to kick on in the Leinster Championship.
Oh, absolutely. I was a little bit disappointed with them last year in the Leinster final, I'll be honest with you, because I did feel from Meath playing Dublin in the semi-final that Dublin were there for the taking. And my hope for Kildare that day was that they'd come out and really attack Dublin. As it turned out, they didn't. They sort of sat back and let Dublin dictate for most of the first half, and then they came out second half and really had a cut at them, but they left themselves too much to do. I think they've realised their potential this year, I really do, and I think that the win last week will give them so much confidence. See, there was a lot of talk about did they over-celebrate and this kind of thing. They haven't beaten Dublin for something like 15 or 16 years prior to that, and for anybody in Leinster to do that, I would say they were fully justified, despite the fact Dublin are at a really low ebb at the moment. So I think you're right. I think it's so important for Kildare to preserve their status, because so many teams have gone up, Meath included, in the last number of years from Division 2 and yo-yoed straight back up within a year of going up. For Kildare now, they've given themselves an unbelievable platform, whether it's this weekend or, as you say, next weekend, which is probably the game against Monaghan in Newbridge. That's the opportunity for them to go and seize it and to really preserve their status with the view to kicking on then in the Leinster Championship this summer.
And a word on Armagh finally as well. Like, they've been a breath of fresh air in the league, beating Dublin, beating Tyrone. They have some very good forwards. Like, we knew Armagh really had the talent, but it's only really this year people are starting to notice them. Like, you mentioned Reno O'Neill there, Stephen Campbell doesn't even start. Jason Duffy's done well in the league as well. Blaine Hughes in goal has done very well. Jared O'Byrne. So they have a very strong team and could easily win the Ulster Championship as well.
Yeah, I really do. I think they're a great outside bet for the Ulster Championship. I think their progress has been sort of well touted in recent years, but this has been the sort of year in which they've really gone after it, and they've been a breath of fresh air. The style of play as well is something that I love. I think so often in Ulster the blueprint is for sort of really defensive, laboured football. What Kieran McGeeney has done with this Armagh team in particular, he's realised that he has incredible forward talent at his disposal, and he's going to utilise that. And I think that he deserves credit for that as well. But the players themselves, for embracing that, there's a really kind of feel-good factor in Armagh. I think if you look at the sort of crowd and the support base that they have now, for years they were kind of sitting in the doldrums, a bit like Meath and Cork in Division 2, didn't know exactly where they were going, and even up until recently, in the last 2 years, they were in that position. But they've taken their game now to the next level, and I think the next step for them would possibly be targeting a league final. And for a county like Armagh, relevant to what we've spoken about with Kildare, I think that would be a huge sort of goal for them to achieve that, with the view to then pushing on in Ulster and really, really challenging the big guns there.
Yeah, definitely so. And you tip Armagh for this game. I'd probably tip Armagh myself, to be honest. Yeah,
I think so. I think they should have a bit to spare. If you're going to watch again this weekend, I think this will be the game to watch. You'll have savage talent on show. There'll be scores aplenty. It'll probably be a real stalemate now that I'm after talking about that. But I think this will be a good one.
Yeah, it should be a very interesting game. But the other side to that, like straight after this Armagh and Kildare game, is the game of the weekend. Arguably Mayo against Kerry. It's on Tralee. It should be Kerry against Mayo. In fact, it's on RT at 7:30. Like, I see the Mayo team there. Aidan O'Shea is actually starting at centre forward. So that's an interesting move for Mayo. I didn't really expect that. But I hear the crowd. It's a sold out crowd. This game should be a cracker.
This will be brilliant. Yeah, both of them like riding on the crest of a wave. Aidan O'Shea has been used sparingly up until this point, and I would, like you, I would have said, now we all know the way it is with teams being named early in the week, there's every chance that he won't start, but possibly James Horan is using this as the opportunity to really throw him in, and he's more or less saying he's ready now for the big one. It's a huge test for Mayo, to be honest with you. I think it's the acid test, and I know they've gone to Croke Park and beaten Dublin, but for me, Kerry are the team at the moment, and if they were to go down there and beat Kerry in their home patch, to me, it's a bigger achievement than beating Dublin in Croke Park just at this moment in time. Kerry have been awesome to up to date, I suppose. But Mayo, there's a real sort of freshness, and you do forget, like, the likes of Cillian O'Connor still has to come back into it, and I don't know where he's going to fit in at the moment, but I have no doubt they will find a place for him, and he most definitely will make his presence felt again. But there's probably a little bit of revenge on the cards, I think, for Mayo, because they'll look at last year and they'll feel like, okay, it's another missed opportunity. But last year was such a missed opportunity, the way they, beating Dublin and paving the way for themselves then to go and defeat Tyrone, but it just didn't really materialize for them in that final. To me, they've come back stronger this year. If you look at the likes of the way Jim O'Connor is playing at the minute, and they seem like a side to me that are going to be bang up there come championship time, but Kerry is, to me, Kerry's the biggest test they'll face prior to championship. And again, their season isn't going to be defined by this weekend, but it could well be if they go down there and get a win.
Should be a very interesting game indeed. And you mentioned Kerry, they're probably the bar that Dublin were a few years ago. Like, what I noticed with Kerry as well, they've improved defensively as well. Dylan Casey from Massive Sacks come into the team. Stephen O'Cumber won't be back for this weekend, but he will be back probably for later on in the year. He's a superb talent there. And that's the area that Kerry really need to improve. And seeing as they've improved there, do you think their team is kind of complete?
It's very close to it. I'd have to say that's been it's been the problem in recent years, was that sort of Achilles heel of being soft defensively and being open to conceding goals against the better teams. We all know the forward talent that they have at their disposal, but Jack going back, that's something that he's instantly looking to sort of eradicate and put a stronger sort of defensive core. And undoubtedly, you'd have to say up until this point, they've done just that. Pitted with the fact that they're playing some incredible football at the other end as well. I mean, you've mentioned Clifford, he just goes from strength to strength. But to me, Sean O'Shea's been the standout player. I just think the way his maturity, you still forget he's such a young man, but the maturity that he's shown, his willingness to work hard all over the pitch and to assist Clifford and the likes inside has just been brilliant. They have a bit of strength and depth now with the likes of Stephen O'Brien. Paddy Clifford's just a revelation, isn't he, inside too? So to me, Kerry are flying. And like that, it's probably the biggest test that they'll face as well. I think the Dublin game was important for them to just rubber stamp their credentials, but they did it well enough that night down there. But this for me is the big one. And Mayo are going to present some, I suppose, challenges that maybe no one else has presented to them up until this point, with the exception of maybe Kildare and Newbridge.
Yeah, Newbridge are over indeed. And I suppose with Kerry as well, like, they have improved defensively, but they've played as well. Even since the McGrath Cup, they've gone full out. They've played David Clifford, Sean O'Shea in nearly every game so far. And then they're going to the Munster Championship, and they're probably going to do the same again against the likes of Cork and Clare. So going to Croke Park with Mayo maybe resting a few players, Armagh if they get that far, Tyrone if they get that far, so far resting players. Do you think that could be an Achilles heel as well for Kerry, that they put so many of their first team players in so early and they could be burned out by, let's say, June or July?
That's always the risk. I suppose with Kerry, and I mean this with all due respect to what's in Munster, but versus what's in Connacht and Ulster in particular, they're looking at it and they're saying to themselves, right, for us, Division 1 is where it's at. They ought to come through Munster. Now, I'm not saying they're going to put out a second team rat and come the Munster Championship, but they probably feel that in years gone by, they haven't put enough onus on the league. And that's probably left them a little bit undercooked come quarterfinal, semi-final of an All-Ireland. They'll undoubtedly get through Munster. We kind of all know that. But it's when they get to Croke Park, as you mentioned, that maybe they've been a little bit undercooked. I think what Jack has gone in there and done right from the start, as you said, from early January, is that he's gone in and probably put nearly his strongest side out with what's available to them. And I do think that they'll get a little bit of a breather in between. And for them, the league is just so important because they don't get the same level of competition in the championship, in the provincials anyway. Whereas if you look at Galway, for example, but in particular Donegal and Tyrone, I look at them at the minute and I think to myself, they're just biding their time like they did last year. And they're looking to kind of time their run late. And Donegal are arguably doing the same. But with Kerry, they can't really afford to do that because the league is undoubtedly where they're going to get most of their challenges, and they have done up until this point.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a sad state of affairs where Munster is at the moment. But
yeah,
Kerry...
that's just the same now, by the way. Yeah. So,
Leinster's been there for pretty much nearly every year since 2011, to be honest. But it's hard to see where Kerry get a test at the same time. They need to get the tests, I suppose, in Division 1. But for this game in particular, would you be backing Kerry to win this game, or do you think Mayo could cause an upset in Tralee?
I'm going to have a draw on this one. I haven't picked a draw yet, Matt, so I'm going to go draw here. I just think Mayo are going to pose plenty of problems for Kerry, and I'll be interested to see can Kerry find all the answers to them. But I do feel that Mayo are a side that's capable of going away to like a fortress like Kerry and playing on the counter and doing it well. I mean, there's going to be a massive crowd there, as you said, but there'll be a huge travelling contingent as well from Mayo. So this is going to be an absolute classic, I reckon.
Should be some game, all right, live in RT. And I probably back Kerry to win this game, but maybe by a point or two. It'll be very, very close in the end. The next game is actually on Sunday, 1:45 on TG4. It's between two Ulster rivals, Donegal against Monaghan. Like, it's a difficult one to judge these two sides. Like, Donegal, they seem to be motoring along pretty well. That's good win over Tyrone last time out as well. But it's kind of the same story with Donegal over the last few years, isn't it? Like, they peak early on in the year, even early in the Ulster Championship. Then once they come up to Croke Park at quarter-final stage, they flop.
Yeah, they have a lot of miles on the clock, don't they? You know, across the board. I know they've introduced some youth in the last couple of years in the form of the likes of Bushy and Gallen and that, but I do feel that's why they're a little bit inconsistent from game to game, because there's so many sort of miles on the clock, like Michael Murphy and even Paddy McBrearty, who's not exactly an evergreen player by any matter of means, but he's been around for a long, long time and played a lot of football. But they're still a pretty imperious team, and on home soil. I don't know. Is it this game in Ballybuffet?
I think it's Ballybuffet. It's in Donegal anyway.
Yeah, they have an amazing unbeaten record in Ballybuffet, and that usually serves them well. And ultimately, in games that they need to win, they tend to win. And this is a game that would sort of go into that bracket. Monaghan have been competitive, but they've probably disappointed in games where we expected them to do a little bit more. The Kerry game in particular, usually they often give Kerry a really good test in Inniskeen, but they flattered to deceive last time round. They've had a lot of chopping and changes in their squad as well. But I just think Monaghan on the road versus Donegal at home, to me, it sort of points towards a home victory and a pretty comfortable one at that. It's not going to be 10 points, but a comfortable win for Donegal over Monaghan will be a sort of 4 or 5 point buffer, I reckon.
And even looking at Monaghan, like, if they lose this game, I think they'll lose this game as well. Donegal seem too strong for them. But look at Monaghan's next two games. They have to go to Newbridge to play Kildare. Well, Dublin at the moment, you would say they'd beat Dublin and Clonus, but then again, you never know. Are Monaghan in serious danger of going down, do you think?
I think they are. I think you have to be realistic. I think, is it only a point to their name at this stage?
I think it's 2 so far.
Two. Yeah. So if they go pointless then again this weekend, it's a similar sort of scenario that a lot of teams are going to face, that they have to win. Probably they have to win their last 2 games, or at least get 3 points from a possible 4. And that's not to say that they have to go to Kildare, and the only hope for them would be that the likes of Dublin could already be relegated before they played them, and if that was the case, you'd imagine they would get the win in a game in which they had to. But I think they're sort of dancing with fire at the moment, Monaghan, and again, they probably just lack a little bit of X factor, I think, versus what you have in Kerry, Mayo, Armagh, even Kildare, to be brutally honest with you. The reliance on the likes of Conor McManus is still there. He's 35 or 6. He's still such an unbelievable operator, but I just don't see where the scores are going to come from if McManus doesn't sort of kick them on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how Monaghan develop over the next few months. Like, will this finally be the year they go down for the first time since 2014 Division 2? Like, that's some record at the same time for Monaghan, but we'll see though in the next few weeks. And I'll be predicting a Donegal win as well. It'd be pretty simple, I think. The next game, it'll be of interest to the whole country, really, especially yourself as a Meath man, Tyrone against Dublin. Now, could Dublin be joining Meath in Division 2 next season, or do you think it's premature talk at this stage?
I don't think it's premature talk at all, to be brutally honest, because there's a distinct possibility that they could go down this weekend, with 2 games to play after that. The fear factor is gone now, and okay, when they go on the road, it was probably never there in the first place against Division 1 sides. But when you see teams coming to Croke Park and stamping their authority all over it against Dublin, to me, that's the biggest barometer that they're a side in big jeopardy. I think, again, a team not in transition, but their team has actually transformed really in the last number of years. There's been so many of those experienced players with countless amount of All-Ireland medals have walked away, retired, or left the panel for whatever reason. And there is definitely a bit of unrest. They don't seem to have much of an identity. I know there was a couple of bits of analysis done possibly on the Sunday game in weeks gone by there, where, you were seeing Dublin sort of take these crazy sort of pot shots, dicey passing that you would never associate with them under Jim Gavin. To be honest, they were such a finely tuned, well-oiled machine. I'd often look at your stats actually after a game. This has gone back a couple of years, and the clinical edge that they would have in front of the post was unerring. Nowadays, that's gone, and they seem to panic when they get into these situations. If you get in a game with Dublin, if you get them into the last 5 or 10 minutes, generally speaking, in the past, that's where they would kick on. Nowadays, that's where they seem to falter. So I really worry for them. The flip side of that is they're playing a Tyrone team who they themselves are at a similar sort of position. Even though they're the reigning and defending All-Ireland champions, I still don't think going down to Division 2 is as daunting a prospect for them, because they've been there in recent years, than it would be for Dublin, who are the all-conquering side in Ireland for the last 10 years or so. So this is just such a huge game. If you, at the start of the league with 3 rounds to go, everybody would have been said this game will be right up there for who's going to make it to the league final. But now it's essentially to decide who won't drop to Division 2. It's an incredible sort of building up to this game. I know the Mayo and Kerry game is probably the most appetizing game of the weekend, but this game for me I can't get away from, because I love the dynamics at play.
Yeah, who would have thought that these two sides would be in relegation battle? Like, it's absolutely crazy at the same time. And about Dublin, do you think there's actually a realistic chance they could lose Leinster this year? I know we've talked about Kildare so far in this podcast, that they've improved massively. Do you think Kildare this year under Glenn Ryan, with that positivity, could possibly beat Dublin this year?
I do. You'd have to say it's a distinct possibility right this minute. There is a possibility as well that Dublin can play their first game out of Croke Park for a Leinster semi-final in donkey's years. I don't know how many years it is. Now, in saying that, if they get Kildare in the Leinster semi-final, or even Meath, what venue takes it that could, fit the demand or crowd for that game? So that remains to be seen. But I do think that Kildare are the big sort of contenders to Dublin's throne in Leinster. And it's unfortunate for Meath, the way Meath are going. In saying that, I still wouldn't mind a crack at Dublin. Okay, if we had the qualifiers to fall back on, absolutely. But you wouldn't like playing them in a Leinster semi-final either. They just need something. They need a win, and I do think a win against Tyrone up in Omagh could well be the recipe for them to kick on and possibly get their season back on track and really kickstart their year. But the flip side of that is relegation is staring them right in the face. 4 defeats from 4. It's uncharted territory really for Dublin. And you're talking about pressure and managers. They don't come much more than the pressure on Dessie Farrell at the moment.
Look, I've been studying, the decline of Dublin over the last few months, and really it started with that training breach in, I think it was April 2021. Like, Cluxton was one player that walked away, McCaffrey was another. Was that a kind of a moment where the players just stopped believing in Dessie Farrell, or do you think there's more to it?
I don't know. For me, he doesn't probably carry the same authority or aura about him that maybe Jim Gavin had before. In saying that, it's a tough act to follow. I always kind of used to compare the Alex Ferguson one with Manchester United, or Arsene Wenger with Arsenal. It's a very difficult act to follow someone like Jim Gavin, who has come in. And granted, Dessie Farrell came in and won in All-Ireland, but I just feel that squad was coming to the end of their time, and it was probably the right time for Jim to step away. And a lot of players then, for whatever reason it was, some of them was just age, and then other things probably the lockdown breach didn't probably help, and some players took that maybe personally and that kind of thing. But there is definitely not the same ruthlessness about this Dublin team that there was 2 or 3 years ago. I think you could hand on heart say that they would put a team to the sword, regardless of who or what they were, whether they were a top Division 1 side or a bottom end Division 4 side. That same sort of ruthlessness just isn't there. And I think the cracks were starting to show at the end of the 2020 season, but really only started to bear fruit then, last year. In Leinster, I seen this stuck through the whole of the Leinster Championship. You have to remember, they went down to Wexford first round of the Leinster Championship, and they got through all right, but it wasn't pretty. Then against Meath, the same, fell across the finishing line. And Kildare, I think if Kildare had a little bit more about them and belief last year, they'd have actually probably beat them in the Leinster final last year. But for me, they are the big sort of contenders to challenge someone this year.
Yeah, it should be very interesting to see what happens. Dublin, and yes, Dublin are in a bit of transition or decline, whatever way we want to call it. But let's not forget, Tyrone are in a bit of a sticky situation themselves. I've seen Lee Brennan actually leave the panel recently now because of game time, I'm assuming. So, is that a bad sign that these brilliant players, like Lee Brennan was a brilliant player of the club championship, for example, in Tyrone. Is it a bad sign that these players are leaving the panel so soon after winning an All-Ireland?
It probably is. And then you kind of question, are players just happy with that, particularly in Tyrone? I'm not going to say that the culture isn't of winning All-Irelands, because they've done that, but they've struggled to probably back up an All-Ireland win with another one in a year or two after that. You look at Kerry, Dublin, Cork, Meath back in the day. The onus was always on to do it again and to continue on that sort of way. With Tyrone, I don't really see that. I think they've even gone off the boil already. Like, the fact that they were back so late, they went on a holiday, I think it was around Christmas, New Year. I thought that was a bit bizarre. They were clearly undercooked starting the league, got a couple of heavy beatings in the Dr. McKenna Cup too, which I know was early season and everything like that. But if you're an All-Ireland champion, you're expected to come out and, to really sort of impose yourself on it from the start. And that's what Dublin have done in years gone by. I just don't see the same sort of traits in this Tyrone team that I've seen in the likes of what Dublin have done in years gone by. And I think it's a difficult one for Fergal Logan and Brian Dooher to instill that hunger again, because the hardest thing after winning All-Ireland is to go and do it again. It's a much harder one to do that, to do back-to-back and retain your crown, than it is, because everybody has your backup. Like, everybody that plays Tyrone is going to want to get that scalp over them, even Dublin this weekend. So it's a huge game for them too. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think they're going to be the same force this year. I think I won't say things fell into their favour last year, but it did sort of pan out nicely for them in the end too. But that's to take nothing away from their success at the same time.
And for this game in particular, would you think Dublin could possibly recover and win up in Tyrone, or do you think Tyrone will do enough?
Oh no. This is an incredibly hard game to call. I might just go Tyrone. I think home advantage. They're very strong up in Omagh as well, and just the fact that Dublin haven't got a point up until this point, I think it's a great opportunity for Tyrone to maybe kickstart their own season, and they'll have to do that because Dublin can maybe freewheel for a while in Leinster. Tyrone won't get the same opportunity in Ulster, so it's important that they really start to make inroads now.
Yeah, I'd probably back Tyrone myself. It'd be hard to ask for Dublin to go up there. But then again, you wouldn't be surprised if Dublin went up and won there. You see Lee Brennan leaving the panel. Maybe there's a bit of discontent there, but we'll have to wait and see. It's live on TG Car at 3:45 on Sunday. And we'll go briefly over Division 3 and Division 4. Division 3 this year seems to be very interesting. There's nothing really between the promotion battle and the relegation battle this year. Maybe Wicklow with Colin Kelly leaving, you'd have to say they'll go down. But you look at that last relegation spot, it's all up for grabs. And even the promotion races up for grabs as well. This weekend, you have Antrim coming up against Longford, Limerick against Westmeath in the Gaelic grounds, Wicklow against Laois, and Fermanagh against Louth. So would there be any games to, interest you there?
I think Fermanagh against Louth is a big game. Louth have got 2 wins now on the spin, and they're really starting to show signs of life under Mickey Hart. 2 great wins as well. Longford, you have to give them credit too. I mean, they were complete rank underdogs against Westmeath last week in that rearranged game. and they came out and got a brilliant win. The pressure obviously heaped onto Westmeath. I suppose before a ball was even kicked, people would have said Westmeath and Laois would have been probably the two favourites to advance from that. Now, looking at it, both have incredibly hard work to do. Laois are obviously still, in contention, but they've got a couple of draws. Antrim have been a breath of fresh air. Limerick, they've been brilliant. And a team, you're talking about teams who are maybe trying to make a burst in Munster. For me, Billy Lee's done an amazing job there. And if he could sustain that, they're absolutely in the mix for promotion. I suppose down the other end, Wicklow, look at they kind of somehow beat Cavan last year. I'm not going to say somehow. They produced one incredible performance to beat Cavan. It was actually in Navan, that game, in that relegation playoff, and that's what kept them up. Other than that, they would have been in big bother. Hasn't gone well with Colin Kelly. I know there was a lot of unrest in the squad, fellas walking away and different things. So for me, they're goners already, and it's just a case of who joins them. But Division 3 is undoubtedly the most open division of the lot at this point, you'd have to say.
Yeah, definitely. So even look at the table now, like Limerick on 6 points, Antrim and Fermanagh and Louth indeed are on 5 points, and then you have Westmeath on 4, then Laois and Longford on 3, and then Wicklow obviously at the bottom at 1. So this should be a very interesting weekend, and we'll probably know more about the promotion and relegation picture this weekend. Like, should be very interesting games there. And finally on to Division 4, like there's Sligo against London, Carlow against Leitrim, Wexford against Waterford, and of course Cavan Tipperary, 2 provincial winners in previous years, meeting in Breffni Park. Like, that should be an interesting game yourself. But would there be any interesting games there in your opinion?
Yeah, I think Cavan, if results go their way, can actually get promoted this weekend with a win, and I'd expect them to do that. I think Tipperary aren't the same force. They've had a lot of fellas leaving the panel in the last number of months. It's not a nice one for Cavan to be down there, but they're doing their job with sort of minimum of fuss. They're not exactly setting the world alight, but they're doing more than enough to account for what's in front of them. The London story obviously hit a roadblock couple of weeks ago with Wexford going there and getting a win. Wexford probably propelling themselves up the table again. But Sligo Carlow, for me, I think that's a big game, because Sligo have been well touted to do well, but it is Sligo and Carlow, isn't it?
It's Sligo against London.
Sligo against London. Sorry, Sligo should account for London. Carlow have actually been improving. I know they had a disastrous result in round 1 against Longford, but they've got back into it in recent weeks. It's Cavan and another. If Tipperary are to be serious about their promotion hopes, they realistically need to go to Cavan and probably win this weekend. And I just can't really see that, to be honest with you.
It's actually interesting to see Tipperary in the table at the moment. They're actually third on 5 points, just behind London on 6. Sligo on 4 points after losing the last 2 games, one of them to Tipperary, one of them to Cavan. So still they could be in the promotion charge. Leitrim there, and you'd have to say Wexford, Carlow, Waterford are a bit off it, but yeah, you'd probably say Cavan will be promoted, and then another probably London, Tipperary, Sligo or Leitrim there as well. So should be a very interesting division as we move forward. And I suppose first of all, before we finish the podcast today, just remind us where we can find the We Are Meath podcast.
Yeah, I suppose for any We Are Meath or any Meath lovers out there, it's a very sort of Meath-based podcast. We do sort of preview and review the games on a week-to-week basis. There's a big sort of club element to the podcast as well, but you can find us on SoundCloud or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. We do release a free-to-air podcast every week, and then we have a subscription podcast over on Patreon. It's Patreon.com/We Are Meath. It's €4.50 a month to subscribe, and you're getting bonus sort of episodes every week, 2 or 3, with exclusive sort of reaction from the Meath camp or club camps, etc. So that's where you'll get us. You'll find us on all social medias as well. I know we have a decent sort of partnership with yourselves as well. We like to see each other doing well. So and fair play on the work, I have to say as well. It's the stats are absolutely brilliant. I know we reference them from time to time on the podcast as well, particularly when you cover Meath games. So keep up the good work as well, Matt.
Thanks very much, Davy, and keep up the good work yourselves. Definitely showing us what Meath GA is about, and thanks for coming on to the podcast today, and wish you the best of luck for this weekend against Cork. Should be a massive battle there, and hopefully Meath, other than this game, will be up there contending for All Irelands in the near future.
Absolutely, yeah. May the best man win, Matt. Thanks a million.